Chris Lewis, and welcome to another video. By the time of this recording, OCG Forbidden Limited list has already been revealed. There are a lot of reactions to it already. A lot of people have already analyzed and thoroughized on this list. I'm gonna have to give my perspective on it. Um, the reason watching the OCG is very important here is because the Snake Eye Fire King deck has been like being more dominant in the OCG than over here. The deck has been around for a couple more months than we have, and it gotten to a point where it's just very dominant. I'd say like after this long of the deck being legal, uh, it's kind of impossible for them not to hit the deck because if they want more strategies to flourish, like for example, Infinite Forbidden, like they need to understand that the fire deck needs to be hit to some degree. Otherwise, you're just going to have another format without the other new strategies like taking place, like in a stronger showing. Uh, but yeah, without further ado, let's begin. I'll talk about the list. I'll bring up my thoughts. Some of these thoughts are pretty much the same as everyone else's, but I might theorize, analyze, and mention a few things that probably are not heard on other lists. And I'll also bring like what I think will happen in the OCG, just looking at their track record, looking at how the decks are performing, and how these hits could marginally change a bit of their strategy. But yeah, so for limited, we have title, wanted, and there can be only one. There are no cards in the forbidden side, which is already alarming, knowing that the fire deck is almost tier 0. You would expect something in the forbidden list by now, but I digress. So there can be only one already happened in the TCG. It happened last format, and on the current list that we have, this is just one of those floodgate hits. Uh, I do like that they're approaching this on like all fronts. That kind of already solidifies the fact that this card is not going to go back to 3 anytime soon, and I really, I'm okay with that. It, we we just need more floodgates to get hit in the game in order for the game to be like better established. That's not to say that strategies dedicated to just try to floodgate your opponent should not exist. I just mean I just wish it would be like a little bit less like polarizing in the fact that even combo decks just play floodgates in order to just like give them an advantage in a game where people are not really prepared for those things to be flipped on them. Shout outs to Summon Limit. Um, Title, this is the last Dragon Ruler. Like to be free from the Forbidden section. I think this, in my opinion, I think Title is the weakest Dragon Ruler. It has one of the stronger effects, but the fact of the matter is you need a water monster to do that. Like outside of Water Enchantress, like of the temple, I cannot think of any other water monster that is splashable outside of a water themed strategy that you would play with title in order to use the foolish effect. And no, I will not be pitching tournaments Rhino Heart for title in my strategy. At least I don't see that as a viable like thing to be doing. That being said, uh, Anglet is back. For those who don't know, Dragonary Rulers is one of my favorite decks of all time. So just seeing cards off the list that kind of make that deck possible is good for me, even though the deck is really not playable this format. Maybe in the future we'll see all the rulers come back on multiple copies, and depending on how it goes, we might see something happen with that strategy. But as of right now, I don't think we're gonna see rulers anytime soon. Outside of Blaster, the Dragon Ruler of Infernos in the Tempai Dragon strategy. Wanted, Seeker, Sinful Spoils. I think this is the best hit, like out of these three. Um, like we mentioned beforehand, the fire deck needs to be hit to some extent. What Wanted does for the strategy is that it makes the deck more reliant on Witch than on Wanted, which is a very big deal because you rather open Wanted than open Witch. The other thing that it does, it takes away a level of resiliency that the deck has. One of the strongest plays that the deck has is the ability to just draw after you like fulfilled your combo line, or just save the wanted for the next turn and then pair it up alongside original Sinful Spoil Snake Eye, and that's just like massive card advantage that you're just getting back for free. Uh, I will say this is a really good consistency hit. However, with so many strong cards in the fire strategy, uh, I don't think this card will be enough for the fire deck. Like, there need to be way more hits than just wanted if we want to see like the deck shifting away from what it's doing at the moment. So now we're going to the semi limits. We have Ib, SP Little Knight, Hiking Avatar Kering, Snake Eye Ash, Kaiser Colosseum, and Part of Extravagance. I'll start with Extravagance. The number one reason this card got hit is because of Voiceless Voice. Like, with Prosperity already limited, Voiceless Voice are struggling in order to find cards to like play as a consistent engine for the strategy, and Extravagance is just one of them. I don't think this is a very good hit. If we're just thinking of Voiceless Voice, I think in order for people to just move away from this card, you just have to limit it. And even then, I think people will still play it. What I think would happen is that they're just going to move away from Extravagance and just play the Dogmatica engine, because Nadir Servant is still at multiples in the OCG, if I'm not mistaken. And that's just another thing that doesn't conflict with their strategy. Voiceless Voice is a very, very strong deck. However, it's not the best deck at the moment. Like, Fire is just very, very, very strong, even for Voiceless Voice. I'd say in a format where Fire is like not as dominant, then Voiceless can become a bit stronger, and it could warrant more hits that way. But until then, I think it's fair to just not hit this deck at all. But Extravagance is a fair hit. I still just think semi limited is kind of weird. The same thing goes for Kaiser Colosseum. This card is forbidden in the TCG, and this card has been in a lot of decks as of late. Um, like, for example, you see it here in the Fire King deck. We'll talk about this in a moment. You see it on the Tempai Dragon deck as well, like a max copies. This is just a very, very polarizing card. Like, I think that Kaiser is one of those cards that really shouldn't exist in the game. Like, we had a format with it for Bujins. I don't mind if they want to make like a dedicated like themed card for archetypes that just work similar to Kaiser Colosseum. What I do mind is just Kaiser being used in certain strategies to just lock out people out of the game. Personally, I think Kaiser is a lot stronger than something like There Can Be Only One. So just having it semi limited is kind of strange. Um, Ash and Kieran. I'll talk about both of these at the same time. Uh, Snake Eye Ash being hit is a good hit. However, I still think that the deck is still super strong even with 2 Ash. What you're doing is you're hurting the consistency of pure Snake Eye and like the Snake Eye Fire King variant, but I don't think hitting Ash to like two really does a lot. Like if you put Ash to two and wanted to one, this deck is still very consistent. Like you see the three poplars, the three bonfires. Uh, Original Sinful Spoils was not hit, so they could be inclined to just play more copies of this. One for one is another consistency card. Like that just goes to show you that it's just gonna take way more hits. Kieran, this card is not really that strong. Like, I mean, it's a very, very strong card in general. I think this is a very good hit for Fire King in general. But I've already seen people even play one copy of this card in the Fire King Snake Eye variant. And we even had Hani Jauhari make it to the finals of YCS Las Vegas without this card. Uh, so it just kind of tells you that they're being very, very lenient and they're being very careful with the fire hits because they don't want to disappoint the fire players and they don't want to dissuade them from playing this strategy. But at the same time, these hits are they're not just strong. They're not strong at all. Another thing to note is, and I'll talk about that. Uh, Now we have a new Fire King, which is the Strix, I think it's called. And this card really changes the deck. Like, you put Kieran to two, like, all you're doing is, if you look at this current list, if you put Kaiser to two and Kieran to two, the deck is 39 cards. So, you're really not changing anything. If anything, what they'll do is just replace it with maybe a one extra copy of Sanctuary or like one more Arvata. They could just play like another starter, uh, and just keep the playing deck as it is. It's not really going to change this deck at all. So it's kind of unfortunate, but not the best hit. SP Little Knight. The only real sense that it makes for me for this card being hit is because of extravagance. And if we look at the voiceless deck, at least the one that topped this past weekend, this is playing two SP Little Knights. So that hit did nothing to this deck. At least this specific one. Most people are playing two. The only decks that you might see playing like more than two would have been Rescue Ace, and that deck faded out of the format. So I really don't see a reason for this card to be hit at least to two. Uh, One thing that I would do if I were like put SP Little Knight on my radar, I would either ban SP Little Knight or just ban put in the forbidden section IP Masquerena. That's like one of the two cards that you should be hitting if you really want to focus on SP Little Knight. Um, Ib is as strong as this card is because this card is very very strong. I'm not gonna like sugarcoat it. Like, uh, just needing a brick in your deck to just play this card optimally, or play multiple bricks in your deck to just make this card very optimal in your combo strategy, it's not enough to justify this card. No pun intended. Um, we might even see this card to three in the future and not change anything at all. It's the same thing as Denglong. But yeah, so my consensus on the semi hits, they hit the right cards. I'm going to say these are all good cards to hit, except SP maybe. But these should not have been semi-limited. I think if all these four cards would have been on the limited section, it probably would have done very significantly well in the OCG. So these are the unlimiteds. So Summon Sorceress has an errata. The way she works now is you need to give a monster to your opponent on the on the adjacent column, and you're locked into types of monsters of the monster that you summon with this card. This card is still very good. However, its potential has been severely limited from what it used to do. And I don't mind that at all. I think if doing two erratas was enough to make this card playable again, I know not many people are fans of erratas. They rather just have the card forbidden than just not being able to play it like the way it was intended. But I I vouch for some cards to come back from the list as long as their erratas are reasonable and they make the card just as playable as they would before. I think Summon Sorceress has a place in certain strategies. One strategy I can think of off the top of my head is Fiendsmith or like Fiends in general. I think Fiends are like really strong at the moment, and this card is a really good card for like the Fiend type. Uh, Other monster types, I Goatee would be another one. Like just giving more consistency to fish decks. Uh, Outside of those two monster types, I don't know if I can see this card in like many other strategies. Earth Machine is another really good one. But usually Earth Machine locks you before you get to summon this card anyway. Yeah, ABC, but again, not really one of those decks that you see often. But yeah, I'm glad she's back. I don't know how strong she will be. Girisu, um, like Supreme King, we've had these cards at 3 already, so this does no changes. Ray of Armors here, we already had this card at 3. Infernity Launcher, uh, we're we're in a whole different meta game right now. The moment this card got hit was like back when the deck was like first released on the Shining Darkness. That was like over 10 years ago. So I say Infernities have been very power crept. The problem with Infernities right now is not that their strategy isn't strong. It's not that they don't have a high ceiling. It's that in a format where hand traps are like very sought after and the level of breakers that we have in the game are very marginally strong. Uh, a strategy that can play with how without a hand is not really good this format because if you don't have extenders and if you don't have like cards to counter your opponent's hand traps that you can just flip on the same moment, uh, you can't do well with infirmities. Like that deck cannot play stuff like uh, hand traps. That deck cannot play stuff like cross out for specific cards. Uh, and that already puts them at a very disadvantage. So this card coming back to 3, like, doesn't really change this deck unless you're playing like a very strong deck that can just utilize this card, like for example a Pendulum strategy. Um, Rev Artemis here. The adventure engine, it has not been hit in the TCG at all this time, and it's not being seen play. So this hit really doesn't do anything in the OCG either. Change of Heart. So I was excited for Change of Heart until I saw one YouTuber, uh, Charles Tuyasin. They brought up a very like lookwork statement on Change of Heart, which actually makes a lot of sense. It basically what they said was this card being at 3 is no different from this card being at 1 because the whole purpose of this card is to bait out your opponent's interruptions. If your opponent can interrupt or use their disruptions or use their cards, uh, like in exchange to this card, then Change of Heart really doesn't do anything because you're just trading advantage with your opponent. Uh, then another problem with this card is that it targets, and that's a very big deal because Voiceless Voice can have targeting protection. The Fire King deck has Kirin, even though it will be dropped to two. Kirin is also targeting like dodging for them. Like the Snake Eye deck, uh, can just like cross out that card, or they can just like do stuff like using like IP Masquerena to dodge those things. Uh, so it's really not that big of a deal. We might see this happen in the TCG sometime in the future. This card, I think, is at multiple see Master Duel already, and it also hasn't done much. Um, I will say this: this incentivizes Sky Striker a lot more than like previous formats. I think if Konami wants to like sell the Snake Eye, I mean the Sky Striker deck, here in the future, like in the next Battles of Legends, a change like this one would be welcomed. Um, and yeah, that's the list. So what do I think will happen to the OCG? So as I already brought up, some of these decks don't really get hit at all. Uh, with the release of the new Fire King monster, we might see that pure Fire King deck be played a lot more than before. This deck is a lot stronger, a lot more consistent, a lot more explosive, and the Forbidden Limited list is not going to change that, like, at all. Snake Eyes is not a winner in this list. Like, just having Wanted Limited and Ash to 2 really does hurt the pure Snake Eye deck. However, the Snake Eye hybrids, like the Fire King version, don't really get hit by this too much. They just have way enough starters that they can work with. I think Voiceless Voice is here to stay. I think this is going to stay this being like the second best deck in the OCG format, and like it's going to take a lot more than just extravagance to just really change this deck. Like maybe a limit to something like Diviner would be warranted in the future. But yeah, until that happens, we're just gonna have to see, wait, and adapt. Uh, I hope you found this video informative to your liking, understanding. I hope this gives you a little bit of insight differently from what other people are doing with their OCG, TCG like list like analysis. Uh, until next time, keep practicing and keep dueling.